The Money Show.
Personal Finance with Warren Ingram.
Warren Ingram from Galileo Capital with us this evening. It's a topic that everybody ponders about, lies awake at night, I'm sure, at least from time to time, wondering whether or not there will be a time where they are able to retire in a degree of dignity and comfort that they hope will represent the lifestyle to which they became accustomed while they were working. And it's a big ask for most people, isn't it, Warren?
It is a big ask, and you're right that they, it's kind of almost the default question for most of us, in our working lives, and we initially, when we're young, we sort of wonder about, one day when we get to retirement, I wonder what that number should be, and it's initially maybe a bit of a vague concern, and then the closer you get to the big D day, the more that becomes I guess a fearful question about how much do I actually need and how much have I got and am I going to be okay, and then a year or two before retirement it becomes sort of a real concrete reality for most people for the first time in their lives. It goes from a concept that's something that's going to happen to somebody else, because it's very hard for us to figure out and attach to our future selves, it's almost like someone else. And suddenly, a year or two before retirement, it becomes real. It's that person that's facing in the mirror. And now you need to know that you've got enough. And all the scary numbers are there. I think my Fisher French always says it's about 5 out of every 100 salary earners are able to retire with sufficient money. So this is a real and very scary issue.
Okay, it needs a couple of parameters, I suppose, and you've got to pick a number at which you want to retire. Corporate South Africa, in its madness, pushes people out to pasture at the age of 60. And it says to them, you are no longer useful to us. You need to bugger off. I think that's the language that they use. And so people who are perfectly productive and perfectly useful, whose careers may have started 40 years ago, are told that they get to their 60th birthday and all of that experience, all of that time, all of that learning is no longer of any value, and they get kicked out. So that is one aspect of it. There are other people who may have a more generous environment in which they're allowed to go to 65. There's some people who work for themselves who may then have the ability to choose a retirement date, or people who create the side hustle for themselves so that when they are sort of put out to pasture by the corporate employer, they continue to earn a living so they're not digging into their savings. So you've got to pick, if you can, the age at which you want to retire.
That's true, Bruce. And I think, for a lot of people starting out, they have this idea that, 45 is really old, which is depressing for me because I'm past that now. And they want to stop work then. For people in that position, I think that the number is almost their lotto number. How much is it, that they need if they're really lucky? For most of the rest of the world, we're getting to, as you say, that age 60, 65. And every year of life that you live past 65, that you are able to generate an income, I almost feel it's a double swing, because it's money that you are able to spend from your labor rather than drawing from your capital. So the capital that stays in gets time to grow and compound, for that time when you can't generate work anymore. And I think it's maybe also let's give some people parameters about how you do this. And there's some very valid, I still think very valid rules of thumb that we can all use. I know in the financial planning industry, there's some really good, very sophisticated financial modeling tools, but those aren't available to all of us 24 hours a day. And for everybody that's sort of sitting there going, gee, what's my number? Well, let me give you some ideas. If you take what you would normally spend in a normal year, and you say you get to an annual amount. So, just say, for some people that'll be that they're going to spend 10,000 Rand a month, and that gets them to somewhere around 120,000 Rand a year of expenses. For people in that position, if you're relatively young, and for me, relatively young in a conversation like this is going to be somewhere around stopping work at somewhere between 45 to kind of, let's say, 60, you need to take your expenses and you need to multiply that by 25. You need to get to kind of an annual amount of investments that you need sitting in investment portfolios that you can use to provide you an income on a normal monthly basis. So I did some quick maths because, I can't do this stuff on the fly, Bruce. And So for 10,000 Rand a month and you're under 60, it's going to be somewhere around 3 million Rands worth of investment assets. And I'm emphasizing investment assets. In other words, not the money that's tied up in your house, because that's not going to pay you any income. It's going to cost you money every month when you're no longer working. And so, if you're spending 20,000 Rand a month, then understand that your investment capital needs to be 6 million. And so we go. So I think that's a starting point. For someone who's over 65, the truth is you need a little bit less investment capital because, unfortunately, you've got less time to live than someone much younger. And so the only real benefit of that is that your retirement number is going to be smaller. And I think it's around about 20 times your annual expenses. So that 10,000.
The problem with retirement, though, and telling yourself that you need 20 times or 25 times and only just scraping by, is that I can't imagine that retirement is much fun. It's a permanent stress as to whether or not this money is going to last, particularly in volatile markets, particularly in high inflation markets, as we're experiencing at the moment. For those of us who may have believed that inflation was dead in 2015, 2016, it's come back to life like Lazarus. And there are so many variables. So you've got to be... I don't know if these numbers are aggressive enough, Warren, in terms of, you may survive 20 or 25 years after retirement, if you're nice and healthy and you don't have too many medical costs. But really, just being able to cover your costs, you surely have got to try and build some fat into the system here.
Well, I think we just need a parameter to start. So I mean, I would certainly say, that if you've got a number, so if you're slightly older and it's 2.4 million per 10,000 Rand, I'm not saying aim for 2.4 million,
right?
As your only number, but just to maybe take you through some of the simple math. So just very, very basically, if someone invests all their money and the way they do it is they choose the most generic, most balanced unit trust in South Africa. The middle of the road balanced unit trust. The likelihood is for the next 2 or 3 decades, it's going to give you around about 11% a year. Why do I say that? Because for the last 2 or 3 decades, that's what they've done. Despite all the Zuma years, despite all the markets going crazy on us and the Rand falling apart and recovering like Lazarus and the JSE falling apart and recovering and falling apart again, the average balanced fund will give you somewhere around 11% a year. If inflation is going to give us somewhere around 6%, or not give us, but take away the buying power of our money by about 6% a year, then that means there's somewhere around 5% of money that you can use to fund your life for the remainder of your life. And I think that 5% is the conservative number. In other words, that's the number that you use if you are older than 65 and able to kind of stop work and then draw that 5% a year. If you're younger, I'm saying don't draw 5%, only draw 4%, because you're leaving behind that 1% extra to give you some compound growth against all the things we're never going to be able to foresee, all the things we can't predict. And I think it's not a bad assumption to make. I think it's, if you think about the last 2 decades, not much fun, and certainly not much fun in markets, to be, either pre-retirement or post-retirement investor. But all said and done, that's what those kinds of funds have done. And I think, one thing about markets is they do move in very big, very long cycles. And I don't think it's unrealistic to do that. But to your point, Bruce, don't, when you're doing this exercise, say, well, my actual lifestyle really costs me 24,000 Rand a month. but I'm just going to budget that, at retirement, I'm actually going to only just live on 20,000. If you're budgeting for below your kind of normal life as it is today, or, undershooting all of that, you give yourself no scope, no budget for the unforeseen. Just now the world really does turn on its head once again, and actually, markets don't deliver what they've done in the last 2 or 3 decades. They deliver much less. You need to give yourself a bit of room for some flexibility against the unforeseen. And secondly, you really shouldn't be working incredibly hard now to just live the most basic, kind of most simple life without any kind of joy and room for experiences and the like. So I hear you, but I think the concern for me is a lot of people look at this and they're gonna sit down now while they're listening to us, and they're gonna go, I've got 500,000 rand, and that guy on the radio says I need 3 million. That's just such a big gap. I'm just going to give up. And that's a really bad outcome in a situation like this. I think it's important to say, you need to know that it's about narrowing that gap every single year. Do this exercise for yourself, at the same month every year. If it's now March, then do it in March next year again. And as long as the gap between what you have and what you need is narrowing, then you're on the right path. And that's not hopeless. And I think that's the thing that really bothers me with this. A lot of the time they get a big scary number from some big financial model, as an investor, and they just kind of give up and they kind of go back to spending, not saving, not planning, and just going, well, I'm in deep stuchers already. I'm not going to deal with this. It's too late, and I'm done. And that's really not the outcome.
It's we've got to consider the fact that you may live longer than you budgeted for, which is, a nice outcome, but it's a risk in terms of your money. Lifestyle costs also are massively variable. Your cost of living is going to go up in some respects. Medical costs will go up. You may need care at some point in the future. There are a couple of real impacts when the world doesn't go your way, with inflation, with volatility, interest rates rising and declining. There are so many uncertainties that you've got to try and, I suppose, manage the few certainties that you can. And that is increasing as much as you can each year the amount of money that you are putting away. You don't want to destroy your life in the years up to retirement, but you also want to make sure that you're not frivolous in your life up to retirement.
Absolutely, and I think just just understanding that everything about money, and indeed I'd give you the position that all about life is a little bit of balance goes a very long way. Don't be so extreme now that you give yourself this fright that I'm going to save everything and spend nothing, because that's not sustainable. That's like going on a crash diet. Crash diets don't last, because we are human beings and we need joy in our lives. Warren Buffett always says if you made him drink water only and only eat broccoli, he would have died a long time ago. He is going to have Coca-Cola every now and then, and his Big Mac every now and then, and he balances it off with some dodgy broccoli and water. But the point is, that's how he gets to live, into the 90s as he does. And I think it's about balance. So it's about saying, if you are spending a bit too much in life, then reduce that and save a bit more. Also understanding, to your original point, retirement is in no way an end point. You stop work because some corporate tells you to do that at age 60 or 62. Understand that the skill set you have, the experience that you've built up, is enormously valuable, and that is not an endpoint. It's simply a change now. It's a change of phase, change of season, and there are lots of businesses, especially smaller businesses, that would desperately value those skills. They might not be able to pay you your corporate salary, but truthfully, there'll be a much bigger return on life, because you get more flexibility, probably more meaningful work than sitting in thousands of useless meetings, by some line manager who knows no idea about what they're doing. That's the corporate way. And so just understanding that, I think, if you're in that sort of, let's say early to mid 50s, and you think, you kind of buy Bruce's argument that, a lot of companies just throw you away at 60 or 62. My challenge to you is it's actually about you. It's about, do you just give up and then you do become not valuable, or do you change skill sets, keep learning, spend some time on ChatGPT, understanding what it is and what's going on out in there in the world, and just tweak the skill set you have to be valuable, to be relevant, and all of a sudden, part-time work becomes something that's interesting, exciting, and maybe much more lucrative than you would ever have imagined. But I think a lot of people tell themselves the story and sell themselves short, that they're not valuable, that they can't do anything. And I think it's really sad, because that skill set is often massively in demand. So the side hustle becomes the main hustle, and I think, just pegging yourself to a corporate career is just selling yourself short and frankly, really short-sighted by corporates, I agree. But actually, maybe they set people free from drudgery and actually allow them to live a much better, much more meaningful working life.
Just the number of people who are pushed out at quite an early stage. You've really got to understand your company's retirement policy. You've got to understand what its restrictions and limitations are. And you've got to, toward the end of your working career, be almost segueing to your new life, whether that be, even if you're earning half of what you were, say, earning in corporate, or a third of what you were earning in corporate, but you're only working 3 or 4 days a week, or 3-4 half days a week, you're earning considerably less, but you're working for a smaller business. And you're taking those skills into that environment almost as a consultant, perhaps. So you don't have the day-to-day stress of delivering on projects. You're advising. You could retire at, say, 65, have another 7 or 8 years of work ahead of you where you're not necessarily saving anymore, but you're not digging into your capital. You're not digging into that savings pool, and you're allowing that savings pool another almost decade to grow, so that when you do need it, you're able to then go, okay, now it's time to not do any work, to take some regular walks, get a dog, and walk on the beach, or whatever it is you're fortunate enough to do at that stage.
And I'm just I'm giving you a curveball. I know it's live, and I know you're going to hate me, but I mean, I think there are quite a few CEOs of companies on the JSE who may have been founders of the companies that they're running now, or not. But there are quite a few that are over 70, that are running thriving businesses and doing incredibly well in what can only be incredibly trying conditions. And it would be amazing to talk to one or two of them, not about their companies, but how they do this, and how this is not the end for them, and they don't see 70 or 75 as anything than just another day, another dollar.
Not a curveball at all. And I, off the top of my head, can't think of them because maybe they're a little more media shy and they don't put themselves out in the public domain perhaps as much as younger CEOs do. But if you've got some names, let's get names. Producers, you set them up and we'll put them onto other people's money.
Lovely. I think it's a great idea. Definitely have the names.
Okay, good. Let's share. You share the names. We'll make the approaches, and let's get some older professionals onto the radio and say, right, how do you do this? Why do you do this? And for so many of these people, they do it because they're obsessed about what they do, and not enough people are obsessed about what they do, Warren. Which is, I think, why retirement is such a big deal. Why people are actually looking forward to the day that they no longer have to get up and go to work. I couldn't imagine anything more dreadful than having that sort of outlook on life, where you just want to stop because it's been such a hell. and unfortunately, there are people who are, in that position. They just don't like what they do. They don't like the people they work with. They don't like the company they work for. They cannot wait to be asked to leave.
Some of the most successfully, so the people who I've met over my lifetime who are successfully retired, and I don't mean in terms of money, but live just a really fulfilled life. They never stop work. They actually just don't stop. They can't conceptualize a day where they're not going to get up and do some work, whether it's not going to an office anymore, and they become sort of serial entrepreneurs. They sell a business, they get told to retire, they sit around for a week, and then they get going again on a new thing, and off they go. And inevitably it's successful because they're dealing with passion, they have purpose, and I'm not talking about making millions and millions. I'm talking about doing something every day that's really meaningful to them. And it's amazing how they bounce there, kind of with a bounce in their step, and they walk to work with a smile on their face, and it's not drudgery, and they couldn't think of anything more they would rather do. And for me, that's about fulfillment and purpose. And someone sitting at 45 years old in a job they hate, I mean, if that's their future for the next 20 years, they're not going to have a successful retirement because they'll be worn out by 20 years of kind of hatred of the work that they're doing every day. That you've got to find purpose and meaning in what you do, or make a change. It's really important.
And then there are studies, I think, which show spending patterns and older people. You kind of wonder why older people aren't taking full advantages of this time of their lives. And you look at wealthy people even in retirement whose priorities just change. They no longer want to go jolling in the same way as they did when they were youthful and 60. They're quite happy to watch the sunset from the patio at home or whatever the case might be. They don't need to go take a drive to a restaurant and go and watch it, or go out 3 times a week or play golf 6 times a week or whatever the case is. Lots of people like that, but not everybody does. And I think a lot of those tables, and you also need to consider this, is that your desire to spend, your propensity to spend, probably does decline over time.
So it's interesting, watching the studies and then my own anecdotal experiences that as people get close to retirement, if they've done well in terms of their savings goals, that they start to take their foot off the savings very close to retirement, and they realize they can maybe go on that extra holiday or one or two. And then in the first couple of years of retirement, initially it's extremely stressful because that first month when there is no salary coming in, and the mechanics of actually where do I draw that cash from? What physically where does it actually arrive in my bank account, and what can I spend? That first 2-year period can be very stressful, but after that, once they make peace with how everything is working and actually realize that it is working, that they do relax, they go on some longer holidays, they spend time traveling with the grandchildren or whatever it is that they choose to do, and they do live their kind of financial best life at a time. But there is an age, and where for some people it's late 70s and others it's 80s, where they go, I'm kind of happy being at home. I've set up my house the way I like it. I enjoy the food I eat. I don't like staying in hotel beds that are uncomfortable to me and noisy and whatever the deal is. I don't like airplanes and airports and all of that stuff. I'm happy. I've seen what I need to see. I want to spend time with the friends and family, and their lives become simpler and therefore less expensive. And so they end up spending a lot less on the other stuff, although at the same time, some of that saving gets offset by medical, and that's okay. But you're right. I think if looking at those studies, we tend to spend a lot less as we get older, and certainly those cost of livings drop a heck of a lot. When you get into your late 80s, early 90s, and the needs and wants are much simpler then, even if people have a lot of money. So that is kind of a saving grace. But my 20 or 25 times calculation assumes that you keep spending right until the day you die, and at age 101. So I'd rather budget for living far longer than the other way around.
And just have a will. If there's anything left and you've got a favourite cat's home and you're fighting with your kids, or they've ignored you for the last 10 years, give it to the cats. You can always give it to the cats. Warren Ingram, thank you as always. Warren Ingram, of course, is a personal financial advisor. He's a chartered financial analyst, and he is a director at Galileo Capital. Get the cheapest dollars, euros or pounds from Shift, SHYFT, because with the cheapest forex rate, you can buy more of what you want while traveling, or you can buy shares in global companies, or even invest in a foreign currency, all through the Shift app. So get the cheapest forex rate around, no matter where you bank, by downloading the Shift app today. Shift operates under the FSP number of Standard Bank. T's and C's apply.